watching Beyond Markets. I am Wole Famurewa. On the show today, we focus on the challenges that players in Nigeria's oil value chain face. You can join the conversation with the hashtag Beyond Markets and follow my handle at Wole Famurewa. Nigerian Foundries is one of the leading foundry groups in sub-Saharan Africa with a total installed capacity of 8,500 metric tons per year. The 49-year-old company serves a number of sectors, including the oil and gas sector. Vassily Barbepoulos, the CEO of Nigerian Foundries, joined me to discuss the challenges around operating in Nigeria's oil and gas value chain. Let's take a look. All right, Vassily, thanks so much for speaking to us today. We really want to focus on local content as the last industrialization opportunity in Nigeria. Many have suggested that that is the case. We've seen a lot of entrepreneurship in the country, but then we have not seen a lot of that moving into the industrial scale. So, for instance, you could argue that, yes, we've seen that in cement, but not so much elsewhere. So your perspective on this. We know the government, for instance, has signaled that it's taking this seriously with executive orders. 3 relate to local content. Overall, what's your perspective on policies geared towards industrializing in Nigeria through local content?
Well, thank you. Let me start from going a bit backwards and saying that we started off thinking about local content in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of activity throughout the 2000s, which accumulated to the signing of the Local Content Act in 2010. And from then on, it has been an experience basically in the oil and gas. And it's only in the last few years we've been trying to push the government to replicate it for the entire country. We've been doing that, saying, wait, we've got all the experience in the oil and gas, so why not take it for the entire country? We are very advanced because a lot of other countries are actually studying our own local content success in the oil and gas. Yes, through the last, let me put it, the last 5 presidential executive orders, except for the number 4, which is more for the VADES taxation. The remaining 4 have been basically to institutionalize local content in the public procurement sector. It's very laudable what has happened. In fact, it's something man has been pushing. And I think it was around June last year where Acting President Oshibanjo signed it. It was it created a lot of hope for everybody. Everybody today is, I like saying it, it's like a chewing gum of local content. Everybody's chewing this chewing gum of local content. But unfortunately, there's still a long way to go. A very long way to go. This last executive order, which was in February, consolidated a bit more local content. But still, these are just executive orders. How?
The impact is in the execution.
We're going to execute. How? We're going to audit what we are executing. What metrics are we going to put in place to see, are we being successful or not? That is not there.
All right, so we still need to think through the execution of those orders. But if we can reflect on what we've seen in other countries, Turkey, for instance, very successful in its industrialization. And to a large extent, one can tie that to localizing a lot of things. Your thoughts on models that appear to be working elsewhere that Nigeria can consider as it tries to put some meat around these executive orders and other initiatives of the government?
I don't think we need to start looking at other models, because we've looked at enough models for the oil and gas and the implementation.
So what we've seen there appears to be working,
yes,
and we simply just
working.
replicate
Yes,
that.
it probably needs more fine-tuning and so on. But right now, for example, local content for public procurement, we need to go and look at our Public Procurement Act.
Yeah.
and overhaul it to suit local content.
Right.
That Local Content and Public Procurement Act don't complement each other, but at the same time, you're not going to be able to enforce local content. I was representing MAN on the Technical Working Committee for Local Content of the Public Procurement Act. And all the MDAs were invited. We have over 700 MDAs. A lot didn't show up. Well, that's not a problem. There was enough quorum and people and ideas and everything. But at the end of the day, the document that came out, we from MAN have not seen anything. And I asked also the NCDMB was present also, and they have not seen that document also. And we were part of that committee. Now, one thing I found out is that the actual, our actual procurement system in the government, we need to review all the policies and everything. You cannot instill local content in a country if you do not have a monitoring board that traverses through all the MDAs, the entire government, to ensure that local content is being followed.
Right.
And that's where the case lies. The success of the oil and gas is because that monitoring board called NCDMB does the entire job. From evaluation to the financials to the monitoring to capacity building.
So clearly what I hear you saying is that it starts with reviewing the laws and of course having infrastructure that will monitor compliance. But help us appreciate the opportunity here. So we're talking about industrializing Nigeria. What's the opportunity that you are seeing if we can, make the tweaks to the laws and implement the monitoring system as well?
Well, the opportunities are huge because it's once you are sitting, you pass this message that we are enforcing local content. You're actually telling people from abroad, come over, partner with us, our local companies, manufacture in Nigeria, and enjoy our market. We're not telling you stop importation. We're just telling you partner with us. If you can make, out of 10 things, we can make 2, we'll make those 2. And see how it goes. Right. In 2010, there were probably 10 countries that were looking at local content. Today, is over 80 countries are looking, including Donald Trump, who says America first.
Right.
And that slogan comes from the KKK, actually.
Anyway, let's come back to Nigeria. And I think you make a very interesting point here about the potential for the focus on local content to bring that external experience and capital to bear to help boost the potential of Nigerian companies. And as you said, we've seen that in the oil and gas industry as well. And that has been the model that has worked there. So can you just help us appreciate that a little more in terms of the low-hanging fruits? So is it in typical manufacturing of consumer goods, or is it perhaps in the business that you're in?
Well, when you're referring to local content, the primary thing is manufacturing. You cannot refer, you can refer to services and all that. Those are the easier local content. If you say, for example, that insurances, if you need to use Nigerian insurance companies, you need to use Nigerian banks, that is quite easy. The problem we have is actually getting manufacturers to understand that, hey, if you do invest into local content, if you push hard enough, we will be able to move ahead. In MAN, we are trying to drive local content in our own way. We find areas and companies where are interested in local content, and we sign an MOU with them. As MAN, We sign an, for example, we've
So
signed...
these are foreign companies?
Well, I'll give you an example. One company is ENI, AGIP.
Right.
We signed last year an MOU for their future projects, all their future projects. And it is an MOU that they are going to support local content manufacturing from members of the Manufacturing Association and in general anybody who's manufacturing. Right now, since last year, I think by April we'll be signing an MOU with the Nigerian Army because they have a big problem. Well, our army has a big problem. We are fighting a war and we are depending on everything being imported. How are we going to fight a war if we depend on everything being imported? I mean, at this present moment, already our president, we've had a number of meetings, and we're vetting right now the documentation. And this is the way we feel that we can push, as man, local content in Nigeria. If once we start seeing more and more companies entering into local content by signing MOUs with Manufacturers Association, hopefully, more and more companies will want to do that.
Right.
Because for each MOU, there is a commitment. And that commitment has to be measured.
Right. So it does sound like this is a case of the companies themselves initiating that local content policy by identifying opportunities. You mentioned the Army, for instance, where it is clear that there's an opportunity for locals to provide the goods or services that government agencies, the military, and so forth require. So isn't that a complementary step beyond pushing for the government to create the broader enabling environment by tweaking the laws and setting up the monitoring system, for the manufacturers themselves to begin to, maybe as they organize themselves, like in the Manufacturing Association of Nigeria, go to different industries and see how they can engage directly?
Well, I think they're both complementary. The government's got to do its own work that it has to do with its local content rules and laws and regulations and procurement policies and so on. As man, which is we represent about 3,000 manufacturers, we are signing up with organizations, big companies and so on to support local, and we hope that if at the end of this year we have signed up with a good number of organizations and we publicize it and we start achieving something through it, this might become an impetus for everyone else to join the bandwagon and for the government to see the necessity to speed up its own work on local content. We cannot have local content in Nigeria or in any other country unless there is an apex organization that monitors it and can transcend through the entire economy.
That was Vassily Barbepoulos, the CEO of Nigerian Foundries. We continue our focus on the challenges of operating in Nigeria's oil value chain. Just help us appreciate how things are working out for local manufacturers in Nigeria right now. We're hearing about the PMI numbers improving over the last few months, so it does appear that some things have gotten better, especially with foreign exchange and so forth. But there are still some critical areas that we have seen very little progress, such as power.
Your question is quite a broad one. Let me start off by saying that most manufacturers till today are not being able to see the fruits of local content. There are those manufacturers who have been very proactive and have been in particular proactive in the oil and gas industry. And those are the manufacturers who have benefited. For oil and gas, it's a difficult one because you have extremely high standards. So before you manufacture, you've got to make sure you've got ISO, you've got to make sure that you're in the right in the right accreditations, you have the right accreditations for your products, that you meet the standards, that you have been audited by a lot of the oil companies and approve your products, that you are in the suppliers list, you meet HSE standards and so on. All that costs a lot of money. So most captains of industries, when they see these hurdles, they say, wow, my company is probably making a turnover of, say, 200 million, and I'm going to have to spend at least 25 million to get it to that level without being guaranteed, and I'm going to get the jobs. So that's a big issue, and we are facing that also inside MAN with our own members.
And in a way, this leads me to another point about the standards that local manufacturers are subscribing to. I mean, one of the reasons, if we want to be very frank here, is that many people patronize foreign or imported products is because they perceive that the standards are better, the qualities are higher, and so forth. And I'm wondering, to what extent, beyond any government regulation, maybe there could be some level of self-regulation that we can see with the manufacturers that can take the case to the next level, that there is absolutely no reason why certain products should not be purchased from Nigerian manufacturers.
This is a question and an argument that I've been hearing, I would say, for the last 40 years of my life in Nigeria.
Is it a valid argument?
Not anymore. The reason why is because, first of all, any company that has survived over 15 years in Nigeria has only survived because of quality. It has not survived because of lower quality and undercutting price. It survived because it's met quality standards at a higher price because of the cost of doing business in Nigeria. So it's important for us to realize that. Another thing is we should bring SON into this. Whatever the criticism of SON being slow and whatever, SON has done quite a good job with MANCAP. NAFDAC has also done a good job in the pharma industry and so on of certifying companies. A big problem we have as manufacturers, we don't understand what are standards. In the olden days, when there was no internet, yes, you had an excuse not to understand what a standard is. But today, you've got no excuse to say, I do not know the standard to what I am producing. I was recently in China. China closed down thousands of companies. One, because they did not meet the environmental regulations, and two, because of being substandard. So I was actually very happy during that technical work committee on local content in the public procurement that SON was there. And what we adopted was that companies that will be considered to be local content manufacturers are those that have MANCAP. That was what was adopted. I don't know if it was included in the final report, because MANCAP states that you have to have a 30 to 33% local content by raw materials and labor. So that is a very good guidance. So if you are a manufacturer, strive to go get MANCAP, and let MANCAP be the guidance to local content. I should state that MAN was very instrumental in working with SON with respect to creating this accreditation for MANCAP.
No, interesting point. Okay, so can you just give us some more insight into the strategy going forward? You are the head of the local content group of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. So no doubt you will continue to advocate for the changes in the laws and setting the standards for monitoring. But beyond that, what else is this, you feel like, secondary strategy to try and drive local content locally?
I think the strategy we are going to be following for the next probably couple of years is this issue of signing up MOUs with companies, with trying to promote through these MOUs with companies local content amongst manufacturers. These MOUs also include besides publicity, they also include exhibitions and so on. For example, there is going to be in mid-April, the Nigerian Army or Nigerian Armed Forces are having in Abuja a exhibition on, let me call it, local content, and a lot of companies will showcase what they do in Nigeria. It doesn't have to be necessarily military hardware, weapons, and so on. I mean, the army needs housing, the army needs clothing, the army needs so many boots, and so on. So we've got to start somewhere. We have another problem, is that many times we expect too many things too soon. We need to give it a gestation period. We at MAN feel through MOUs and through exhibitions and through publicity and such things create awareness, and then hopefully it would reach to where we can present success stories of companies that have been successful into moving into local content manufacturing, and hopefully that will get the bandwagon moving, and more government will follow into that, and so on.
Right. And in terms of supporting your advocacy, I think evidence is always the best way. So earlier I asked the question about what's the opportunity here if we can really industrialize through local content. And I was wondering if you can speak more to that point, especially for our viewers and perhaps even our viewers in the public sector. Help them appreciate what Nigeria can gain beyond what it's losing by not industrializing through local content. But what are the clear big wins for this government and for the country as a whole?
Clear big win, employment.
Jobs.
Clear big win, innovation. Because with the way things are going in the world, each manufacturer has to innovate and move forward technologically. Clear big win, foreign exchange savings. Clear big win, having a strong manufacturing base from where we can build a nation. These are enough things. When I'm saying strong enough manufacturing base is, if we've got a strong enough, we can then make our demands for power sector. Right now, as manufacturers, yes, we are talking, we need power and this and that, but it's very slow to happen.
That was Vassily Barbepoulos, the CEO of Nigerian Foundries.